Good morning, Jean.
Good morning.
How are we?
Very well indeed, I'm pleased to say.
That's good. Um, I hate to ask you this, being a lady, but what year were you born?
1924.
1924. So you're 90,
Yes,
90 at the moment.
at the moment.
So your birthday, you haven't had your birthday for this year yet.
No, October, I shall be 91.
91, goodness me. We don't look it.
Thank you very much.
Where were you born?
Where was I
Where were you
born?
born, yeah.
I was born in Oxford City, in Beaumont Buildings, number 8. So was my sister, who was 4 years older than me.
Beaumont Buildings, whereabouts is that?
Just off Beaumont Street in Oxford, right in the heart of the city.
Is that round the back of Beaumont Street?
No, you say you came down Beaumont Street and turned right, you go into Wellington Square,
Yeah.
and it's off
Right, that little road round the back of
Yes.
round the back of there, yeah. I
that's
know.
right.
The British Institute is there now.
And
There's
is it really?
Yeah, there's some they're lovely houses, those ones.
It was lovely there, because we had to be near for Daddy to get to the county hall where he worked in the legal department, because there weren't all these cars with gadgets on, and it would worry Mummy if we were too far away. So we were all happy together.
Did you rent the house or did you own it?
I think it was the college property. They didn't sell their houses. They preferred to say, yes, you can rent it. So Daddy knew the bursar.
It's usually St John's or Christchurch round there, I think, own those.
It we belonged to Exeter College.
Right, okay.
I'm not quite sure, but I think we did.
It's one of those lovely red brick terraced ones, was it?
Yes, it was lovely, especially. Now, I remember when St Giles Fair came, and it closed the whole of St Giles's for 2 days. And I remember getting up in the morning and running along to where our school, Oxford House School, was. And you could look down Pusey Street, and there was the fair. All built during the night, it appeared the next day. And that was fun. St Giles's Fair in the good old days.
That would have been, what, the end of the 1920s, early 30s then?
Yes. They closed St Giles completely for 2 days.
Yeah, they still do now.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. But it would have been all steam driven then, I suppose.
Yes, beautiful. You heard
Horses.
the steamers coming in and the bears coming in as we were laying in bed. It was absolutely magic to us, you know. It was lovely.
And they take it all out Sunday night, don't they? So the road's open again
Yes.
Monday morning. Amazing.
And Mummy used to say she remembered her days going to the St Giles there, and they were queen of the Helter Skelter. Her and her friend, they kept going up to the top and coming there, and the airman, here they come, the 2 girls, and up they went again. We had to laugh because you couldn't imagine your mum coming down the Helter Skelter. But they
How old were your parents when you were born? What sort of age were they? When you were born in 24,
oh,
how old were your parents, do you think?
oh, they were young, not very young, but they weren't old parents.
Right.
I think they got married just after the First World War.
Right.
Because they rang Mummy up, the matron did, to say that unfortunately your fiancé's been wounded and he's lost a leg. And I thought I'd warn you, dear. Mummy said, that's right, no problem. And Daddy came back, and Matron said, "Oh yeah, you're a sensible young woman." And Daddy came back, and of course there were none of these magic legs that they've got now, and he was married with a peg leg
Where was that, in St Giles or?
at St Giles's Church,
Yeah.
because I got married at St Giles's Church.
Which one? The north end or the south end? The one at the top or the bottom end?
The right in the middle, I believe they
Opposite
are
Debenhams.
using it for something else.
I think they're both being used as. I think they're still both churches, aren't they?
Is it
I
still a
don't know
church?
whether that one, that end, is still a church or not.
It was lovely. It was
church,
right at the end of Pusey Street. You were in St Giles's
Yeah.
then,
Yeah,
and there was St Giles Church.
yeah, that's
And I
right.
was christened there, so was Pam,
Yeah.
and I was married.
So your father was injured in the First World War.
Yes, he had
Which
his leg
battle? Which battle was that? Do you know?
on the Somme, I think.
Oh right.
Yes, he had his leg blown off. And then, of course, there weren't all these magic things. I think he got a bit of gangrene there as well, but
Which regiment was he with?
Oxford and Bucks.
Oh right, right.
Yes, it is amazing when I tell you that it didn't interfere with their life whatsoever. And it wasn't until my darling dad was over here and he collapsed one lunchtime and he'd got a carcinoma of the bronchus that we realised how awful that leg was. They were heavy legs, you know, they hadn't got all these, but it never interfered with their life at all. Mummy and Daddy carried on normally. Mummy did a lot of worrying if the weather was bad, because Daddy would insist on going to work. "I've left a lot of work I've got to do," he said. And one snowy day, Mummy said, "You won't try and get to work today, will you, Percy?" "Oh, yes, I shall be all right." She said, "It's pretty slippery." "No, don't you worry." Off he went. 5 minutes later, he said, "You were quite right, Bessie. I've slipped over 4 times, so I thought I'd come back in."
So that
But
must
of
have
course, when he fell very gently,
Yeah.
because he was used to. And one day his leg broke down in Newnhall Street, where the Oxford Mail offices used to be.
Oh yeah, I remember it.
And what happened was his leg came away because they were sort of hooked like you would hook your suspenders. And he just grabbed hold of it, put it under his arm and started hopping towards the Oxford Mail offices. And 2 elderly ladies said, "Look, that gentleman's got his leg under his arm. He never has he?" "Yes, look, he's just hopped up the steps and gone in to the office." And all Daddy did was, when his leg became loose, he just eased it up, put it under his arm and hopped, because they were used to breaking down in those days.
So where did you and your sister go to school?
Oxford House School, we were very lucky. We had a private education, and Oxford House School was on the corner of Beaumont Buildings, so I could see my bedroom if I'd stepped on my toes out in the classroom. I looked up and thought, "Well, that's my bedroom."
Goodness
We
me.
were, because we had to be near to places because of Daddy's artificial leg,
Right,
you
right.
see, because there were none of these cars. But he started making inquiries and started up Blesmar, which was the British Limerick Servicemen's Association.
Is it still going?
And one day they went off to a conference, And believe it or not, it was quite true. There was a lovely hotel with a Belisha crossing that they could get to the front. And Daddy said there was 4 of us and there was only one good leg, and that was mine. There was armless ones, but of course they'd all got these artificial things. And he said it was amazing. We were all chattering away, and I was the only one with one good leg. So they're the Limnis ex-servicemen are a certain breed, and I've noticed in these young ones that have come into it, they've got that same feeling that Daddy's generation had.
Yeah.
It's rather marvellous. It's a way they attack their disabledness, because it's a great shock to them.
Yeah, it must be.
But they all do it.
So you went to school locally. When can you remember much about your school?
Much better.
About your school?
Oh yes, it was lovely. The Mrs. Steens, there were 3 sisters, Ruth, Marion, and Amy, I think. And the one that did most of the teaching was Amy, and she'd got this awful arthritis. She came across from the house to the school in a wheelchair all those years ago. And of course, although it was a private education, we were still naughty children. And one day, I'll never forget, she got her book. She used to keep it like that under her chin. And she looked up. God forgive me, these awful children. We were trying her to the... But we weren't being really naughty. We were doing it in ever such a nice, polite way. One teacher I didn't like, she was their brother's daughter, and she was a horrid person, and I didn't like her at all. She spoiled it, but all the others was very nice. And at Christmas, we had a party in the schoolroom, and in those days you had shutters to divide you into rooms.
Well, it was one big room with shutters, right?
And you got the shutter pole and pushed them. And Ruth was the one who played the piano, da-da-da-da-da-da, and we all danced round. It was lovely. It was funny, but it was lovely. All by gaslight, you see. There weren't any electricities about.
So that would have been, what, in the late 20s, early 30s then?
Yes, very early 30s, really.
Early 30s, yeah.
Because I remember gas being in the house in Beaumont Buildings. When we had electricity put in, everyone was on electricity then. And I didn't realise that we were actually on gas. You know, that you had very fancy gas shades and what have you.
Right.
But you'd had to be very, very careful about fires. But we always were, because of Daddy with only one leg. You see, he'd have to put his other leg on before he could get downstairs. So we were very fire conscious, very, very. But we were all happy.
So you left, what age were you when you left school?
When I left school, I think I was, let me just tell you, nearly 16.
16, goodness.
And then Pamela, of course, was in much higher education. She was very good, old Pam. She said, I'm not. I said, you are. I'm the dunce. No, you're not, Jean. Yes, I am. Your brain of Britain. And we had lots of laughs and chats. And then I followed Pam, who was finishing at Secretarial College, where we went to become secretaries, proper secretaries.
Yeah.
And that was very nice. And then I saw advert in the Oxford Times that the Radcliffe Infirmary, that's now vanished, was advertising for a junior shorthand typist. So I cocky-like applied, and Mummy nearly fell off her chair because at one time I didn't like passing the Radcliffe Infirmary. I was frightened. I didn't like ambulances. But I went there and I got this junior job, and I stayed all my life in the same job for 40 years.
But that must have been during the Second World War when you went there, because
Yes.
you must have been 15 or 16 when the Second World War started.
I wasn't...
39 the Second World War started.
I don't think I was that old, but I remember cycling from a school that I went to up the Iffley Road called Crane's Court School, because Oxford House School, they retired and they sold the goodwill to Miss Crane. And she was a wonderful elderly lady. She smoked like mad. She walked about smoking.
Oh, but no one cared in those days, did they?
No, they didn't at all.
They didn't know.
And that was a very nice school. We wore corduroy velvet tunics and tussle blouses. That was very nice. And as I was cycling back to Wharton Crescent, it was all sort of, the sun was out, but it wasn't shining. It was in the sky. And that was all the smoke from Dunkirk.
Incredible.
So,
Yeah,
Dunkirk.
because when was Dunkirk? 40?
I was still at school. And it didn't click. I thought, this is funny, it's a bit dull. And of course, it was all on the news. And my dad wanted to volunteer for the Second World War. And in the legal, they said, no, we're not going to allow you. The youngsters must fight this war. You've had your chance and you lost the leg. And so he said, oh dear. So he joined the Home Guards. Did you ever see Dad's Army?
Dad's Army, yeah.
Yes, that was a good take-off.
It was it?
We used to pull Daddy's leg.
My dad used to say that because my dad was born 1914.
Ah.
And he said the Second World War, he said all they had was shovels and bits of wood to start off with at the start of the Home Guard.
Yes.
They had no guns or anything to start off with when they were first formed. So he was the local Home Guard in Oxford then, was he?
Yes, and Daddy was coming down St Aldate's. Of course, it was all blacked out, the whole of Oxford. And he suddenly went dong. He'd got his tin hat on, but he was keeping close to the wall so he didn't get any traffic that might be dashing about for the army. And he nearly knocked himself out. He bumped into a lamppost. We said, "Trust you, Daddy."
Good job he had his hard hat on then.
Yes, it was. He was all in his khaki uniform.
So do you remember anything else about the Second World War?
I remember it was blackout, absolutely, with warden saying, put that light out and pull that curtain. You daredn't show a light, and the whole of Oxford was blacked out. But during the daytime, it was quite normal. So you went into Woolworths, that's not there, and they were selling little fluorescent brooches that shone up. So when you went out at night, you saw a lot of these little lights walking about, and when you got near, you realised it was people. You said, "Oh, hello. I saw your light," and it was comical, really. It was jet black everywhere, but there were these little tiny, they were only tiny, they were all about threepence, you know. and everyone went in and got one on their coat, so they had a bit of a light on.
What about the rationing? Did that affect
Oh,
you
that
much?
was terrific. Mummy was a wizard at baking things lovely. She was a wizard. And that I'm glad you've remembered that, because what happened was everyone was happy with each other and sharing things. And the word went round that a butcher was having sausages in that day. So, are you coming, Mrs. Palmer? Oh, yes, I'll come. So off they all went. And take your ration book, and you got one sausage for one book. So Mummy came back. She said, I've got 4 sausages today. Oh, splendid, said Dad. And so she did a ensemble. It was lovely. She took such care and made such good of the little. And the cheese ration was, well, all the mice were laughing their heads off because...
They were all starving, were they? When you said you were working at the Radcliffe, when did you start at the Radcliffe Infirmary then? Was that during the Second World War?
Yes, the World War was on, because we had soldiers come straight from the battlefields into outpatients, where, say, about 2 o'clock in the morning, to wait to be picked up with the army people to take them to the proper place. So that, and I was called out several times because they'd got all these MP47s that had to go with them with all their details on. And because I was living near the Radcliffe, I got called out, and I bravely went out in the dark. But secretly, I'd got a hat pin in my hand in case there was a nasty man who might attack me. I could stab him.
What's an MP47?
A big brown envelope with all the details of the soldier and what he'd had and what he was doing and where he would have to be stationed. And they came right in from the battlefield into outpatients at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that was Dunkirk time. That was awful, Dunkirk. As I say, I remember the street road that I was cycling on. It was sunny as this, but it didn't shine. It was there. It was terrible. They were being bombed by the Germans and fired at. And of course they were just exposed. And they were walking out. All these little boats that people owned came out to pick up as many as they possibly could. And that was very brave because they were right in it. You know, they'd got no ammunition or anything on. They just brought their boats as near as they could and took some to the big boat that couldn't go any nearer because it was too shallow for them. So they did that.
How did they get to Oxford? By train?
How did they?
The casualties get to Oxford, do you know?
Sorry.
How did the casualties get to Oxford from the coast? Did they get trains, or were they lorries?
I think they mostly came by lorries, army lorries.
Right.
I think that was it. But a lot of them were able to walk quite well, which was very good.
Yeah. So you of course they used the factories up at the car factory as a repair place for Spitfires, didn't they?
Yes, you see, the rumour went round that we wouldn't get bombed in Oxford because Hitler wanted to live here with the colleges. But apparently, in that field at the bottom here, they dropped a bomb because when they came had finished bombing Coventry and London, if they'd got any bombs left, these German pilots just dropped them anywhere because they daredn't go back to Germany with a bomb still on their planes. They would have been shot by the Germans, would have shot them themselves because they were traitors. You'd have thought they'd have been glad to have a few bombs back and packet it, but that
I don't think it works that way.
went.
Did your parents have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, there's in the other room there's Uncle Richard, which was Mummy's younger brother. She had Auntie Gladys, who was her older sister, and Uncle Harold, who became an American because he married an American woman, and he went over to America and got naturalised to become American. And Uncle Dick, did I manage? Uncle Dick and Joan and Auntie Dolly. Joan was our cousin.
And you knew them all, did you? You met them
Yes.
all and knew them all?
I didn't know the American because I was too young when he went off, so I didn't know him, but Uncle Richard I didn't know. He had his portrait painted. But my little cleaner, she has to squirt everything, and I said,
What, the
"Don't."
one you've got now, you mean?
Yes, I said, "Don't whatever you do touch that picture." No, but she did. She squirted it, which is naughty because she didn't understand that a real painting, you've got a black background.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. So, but I think I've saved it, but it doesn't matter.
So what sort of things did your aunties and uncles and cousins do for a living then?
Uncle
Can
Dick.
you remember what they did? And
Yes, Uncle Dick was an upholsterer and had got a furniture business in Headington. Auntie Dolly did the old dressmaking, and Joan, I'm afraid, just stayed at home, but she was called up. We said to her, "Joan, you ought to volunteer to go into the factory and do munitions. You'd get a lot of money." "No," she said. And she joined, she was called up to the ATS, and I think she had a very good, that saved her life actually, because it brought her out into the world. And then they went to Beckley, retired to Beckley, and had a small holding.
what about holidays? What did you do when you were a child? Did you go away anywhere?
Yes, of course it's squash going abroad. We always went down to Weymouth when we were very young because the sea was so calm and safe, lovely. Then we went down to Devon a lot. I was taken down to Devon when I was 9 months old. So Pamela tells me, my sister, she said, "You were 9 months old and you were on the beach, Jean." Oh, was I really? And one thing, it was quite a novelty. It took me a while to realise that I was younger than Pamela. And Mummy and no, Pamela was born before you. Well, how can she be the eldest? Her birthday's not till the 16th of October, and mine's on the 7th, so I must be older than her. And finally they got it through my head.
So you never met, did you meet your grandparents?
Unfortunately, they all died before I was born. Grandma Rowland, Mummy was a Miss Rowland, and Grandma Palmer, they died.
So you didn't know really much about them
And
at all?
the day my grandfather died, Mummy used to tell us, he was up in London on business, and he sat waiting to go in to dinner at night in an armchair and just blew his nose and was dead. He broke a blood vessel.
Goodness.
And Grandma Palmer went rushing down to the station to get a train. And when she got to the station, she said, "What am I doing here? I shouldn't be in there." She was so shocked that her beloved husband had died that she couldn't remember why she'd got rushed into the station, Mummy said. But it was only temporary that, of course, they said, "Don't worry, Mummy, Grandad has died." "Oh, yes," she said, "of course."
Goodness. So when you went down to Weymouth, did you go by train or?
Yes, by
That
train.
must have been quite a journey.
It was lovely. I'd got my little suitcase with a banana in it and a notebook and pencil. And Pam, of course, had got proper books to read. And Daddy always, when we got there, he called a taxi and said to the taxi driver, "Will you go along the front so the girls can see the sea?" He said, "Certainly, sir, but it costs more." Daddy said, "That's all right, because it's longer to go that way." Daddy said, "That's all right, their holiday's just beginning." And of course we were sat in the taxi and there was the sea. Oh, screams of joy were coming out of the back of the taxi. But we went to a private house. There was an elderly lady and gentleman running it, and we called her Grandma Perrier and Grandpa, and that was lovely. It was, whenever I smell sweet peas, I can see the table in the dining room with a big bowl of sweet peas, and I never ever forget, every time I smell a sweet pea, I'm back in Weymouth, a youngster.
Did you go there a lot?
We went there every year. Then we went down to Devon to Dawlish
Oh yeah, that's
and
nice.
had lovely holidays there. And it's strange, isn't it? My husband was a Devonian, and we went. He lived in Oakhampton on the edge of Dartmoor, and when I was courting him, or he was courting me, I went down to see his parents, and we went out in the car, and blow me if a prisoner hadn't escaped from Dartmoor. And they stop you, lift up the boot and look in, and you all sit trying to look innocent. "It's not me. We haven't got any prisoners in here."
So how did you meet your husband?
How did it?
How did you meet your husband if he came from Devon? Was he up in Oxford at the time?
Yes, he was a police officer
Oh, right.
with Oxford City Police.
Goodness.
He met for 25 years, and then he said, "I'm going to retire on the 25th year." I said, "You can't do that, Stanley," because at the time we were in a police house just for a year. Horrible.
Where was that?
Up in Cowley.
Oh, right.
And so he said, "Yes, I am." And he was discussing, he said, he was 45 when he retired, and he got round to the college bursars, and they said, "You've got all the qualifications, well done. Yes, we accept you as a mature student." So he was a mature student for 2 years.
Which college?
Westminster.
Oh, right. Okay. That was up in Botley? Or was
That's
it in
right.
Oxford?
It
was at the top of Botley, was it, at the time?
it was a teacher's
Teacher
special
training, yeah, that's right.
college. And he became a geography teacher.
Brilliant. That's really
And,
good, isn't it?
Barton, Headington, was a very crummy place full of hooligans and
Still is in places.
naughty men and children. And when Stan qualified, he was able to go to Barton School teaching. Of course, all these little devils started singing da 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 da.
Z-Cars.
And he said, none of that. But they adored old Stan because he was so fair. He didn't get grumpy and say, sit down. He would say to them, no, behave yourselves, else I should get angry, you know.
But that's because he'd been a copper for 25
Yes,
years, isn't it?
and it was, and he said to me one day when he came home, he said, I felt awful, Jean. One of the pupils came up and said, sir, can you tell me what this is? And Stan said, certainly, da-di-da-di-da. He said, little did he know, he was talking to the ex-policeman who got his father put in prison because they were real rough ones
Oh, yeah.
up there.
What year did he finish in the police force then?
Well, he'd done 25 years. I honestly can't remember because
Was he the same age as you?
no, he was 7 years older than me.
7 years. So he was born about 1931 then?
No.
7 years older than you, sorry.
Yes.
So he was born 1917.
Yes, that would be Stanley
So
John.
he didn't do any other job apart from the police? Did he go straight? He must have done. If he was only 45...
That's right. He did 25 years, and he was living in the single men's quarters down St Aldgate because,
He must have come out of the police force during the Second World War then.
well, he was in the Second World War.
Right.
He volunteered and had an interview. He thought it would be nice to be a fighter pilot. So he had his interview and all qualifications all okay. And then the examiner said, I'm very sorry to have to tell you this, but we can't accept you for a fighter pilot. Oh, said Stan, I'll explain. He said, you've been a police officer where you think before you act. To be a fighter pilot, you've got to act before you think. And he said, I'm sorry, we daren't take you because it's such a really fast. But he said, we'll accept you for the police, for the RAF, certainly. So Sam became a flight engineer in a bomber.
Oh, right.
And
Where
went
did he
on
do that?
bombing raids. So,
Where was he stationed?
well, that was before I met him.
Oh, right.
I don't quite know where he was stationed, to tell you the honest truth. If I did, I must have forgotten, but I don't think I worried about... I was so glad for the war to be over because when I got married, there was still rationing.
Yeah. Well, there was rationing when I was alive.
Yeah.
I was born 1954, and the rationing finished in 1955.
Yes, and
People
I
don't
got...
realise that rationing went on
and
for
I
10
got-
years after the Second World War.
Yes, and I
Quite
got
amazing.
married in July 1951. That's me,
51.
yes.
And he how many years did he do in the police before he finished in the police after he married you?
25 years.
But he didn't...
How many?
Well, after you got married,
18.
how many more years did he do, do you reckon?
1990. About 7 or 8 more
Right.
years a policeman.
Yeah, so almost the end of the 50s then.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, I hated it when he was on duty. Fortunately, the neighbours of Mummy and Daddy decided to go back to where they came from. It was a cook and a butler, and they decided they'd go back to Northampton, which they did. And they liked me and Stan and Pam so much that they would offer Stan the first refusal of their house, which they were selling. And of course Stan jumped at it, and I had to keep on to Stan. You're not just saying that, are you, Stan? Now think about it. Oh no, he said, I love living in Walton Crescent, and to think there's a house going, beautiful. I said, well, it's next door to where I used to live. All the better, he said. And I had to keep nagging him, saying, you sure? Of course I liked the thought of it, but you got to be sure.
So Walton Crescent, you'd already moved from Beaumont Place to Walton Crescent, had you?
To Walton Crescent.
That's off what? Off Walton Street?
Yes, it's off Walton Street, opposite Little Clarendon Street. That's why it was easy to get to the fair.
And you bought that house? Or Stan bought the house?
Yes, we
Can you
bought.
imagine how much that house would be worth now?
No, it was just like the one that I was living in next door, number 9, and that was number 10.
They're big, tall houses, aren't they, down there?
Yes, they're 4 flights up.
Yeah.
Yes, you've not got any lofts. The top bedroom is
in the
under
roof.
the roof.
Yeah. Lovely houses, though.
Yes, they were. It was a very happy time there. Very happy. But we always were happy. We're in a gang.
Did he finish as a PC, or did he get promotion when he was in the police force? Or?
Yes, he became a senior inspector.
Oh, right, goodness.
I've got actually a photograph of him in there.
We'll have a look afterwards.
You
yeah.
have a look
Yeah,
and see.
yeah. He did very well then if he finished
Yes.
as an inspector.
You see, he'd got a lovely wife, me.
Ah, a lot of support, obviously.
You egging him on. No, I didn't know. I didn't egg him on. I let him do what he wanted to do. And he went off the first day to college with a clean handkerchief. Have you got a clean handkerchief? Have you got your cap with you? Good. Be a good boy then. And within a couple of hours, Stan said, I don't know myself, darling. I finished for today, because always somebody tripped over about 9:45 on Carfax, just as Sam was hoping to come off duty. And of course you had to go through all the writing and goodness knows what.
He didn't know Doug Jeekins, did he?
He didn't.
Doug Jeekins, Sergeant.
Yes, so did I.
I was brought up with Doug.
Were you really?
Yeah,
Old Jeekins. He
Yeah.
had a very nervous breakdown at one time.
He was a tall fella, about 6 foot,
Yes,
6'7", 6'8".
Very.
He was Uncle Doug to me. He wasn't really my uncle.
No.
But I lived next door
I
to
liked
him.
old Doug Jenkins.
He was a monster of a bloke. Yeah.
It was so sad because he had this sort of breakdown, and one day at one of the parties that we were at, he suddenly banged on the desk and shouted, and all his pals were around. We didn't say anything.
They used to call him the Chief Inspector of Carfax or something.
Yes.
He was always on Carfax.
That's right.
Yeah, Uncle Doug, I called him. Yeah, he was lovely.
Oh, dear old Doug Jenkins. I liked him.
Yeah.
He was
He was a proper old-fashioned copper, he was.
Oh, yes, he was.
He got me out of a few scrapes when I was a lad.
I bet
Because
he-
I knew him.
Yes.
If ever I got stopped by the coppers, they always used to say, and where do you live then, lad? And I used to say, I live next door to Doug Jeekins. On you go. Because they knew that Doug would have a go at me if he found out I was
Yes.
in trouble. So it was always a good name to know, Doug Jeekins.
He was so nice. I liked old Doug.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm glad you knew him.
Yes.
Let me think. Where are we? What about cars and transport? Did your dad ever have a car?
cars and trains.
Car, yeah, as in your dad have a car, or did you and
No.
Stanley have a car?
Yes, what happened was I learnt to drive, Pamela learnt to drive, and of course Stan was able to learn at the police.
Goodness me. When did you learn to drive? How old were you?
I was married. I was in my about 27 or 28 I learnt to drive.
Goodness.
And Pam said, "Oh, I shan't bother." I said, "That's all right. I loved driving." And one day, Pam and Daddy went off for a walk, and she came back driving a Ford Anglia. She treated herself to this lovely maroon one, and Daddy, they at a garage up North Oxford. Daddy knew the senior bloke up there, and Pam had been having driving lessons and passed her test. And I said, "Oh," she said, "it's my car." Or how? She said, "You can drive it any time you like, Jean. I've got it insured for you to drive." And she let me drive that car no end of times. And she said, "I like sitting in the front relaxing." So I said, "Well, I seem to be grabbing all the driving." "No, I'll let you know if I want to drive. I'm quite happy with what I'm doing." And that started off when we were here. And Pam was always a bit of a devil for getting up. So I got the car out, waiting, and she rushed out. I said, "I'll just get out, Pam." "No, you carry on driving. I'm all right." And I monopolised it, but she didn't mind at all. Every time I was driving the car, I said, "Would you like to drive?" "No, you drive, Jean. I'm quite happy with what I'm doing."
Did you you had to take a test, take a driving test to get your driving licence?
We both passed first go, thank God. I don't think I could have gone for the strain of waiting. Oh, it was nerve-wracking because, during my time you had to change gear and back and twist. And these days, John Herbert's got a car that he presses one knob and it opens the door for you and something else. I said I'll never be able to manage that.
You had riding lessons as well, didn't you, Jean?
He what, darling?
You had riding lessons when you were girls, didn't you? You and Pam.
Yes.
You used to ride.
Where did you ride?
Up at Headington.
Oh, right.
Over Shotover. Right. Did you say ride?
Horses.
Yes,
Horse
that's
riding.
right. We used to go up to the school, and I had Midnight or Seagull, and Pam had, I think, Robin, because the groom that was up there said, "I'll get you a big horse, Missy, because you need a man-sized horse." I thought,
Oh, that was nice.
I thank you very much. I got on and we went round and round. And Daddy, cheeky, he said, "Now don't worry, girls, but sometimes horses can't help it, but they get the wind." And so we said, "Oh, that's all right, that won't bother us." And blow me, all midnight, we were going round, the groom was taking me round, and all of a sudden there was a terrific and I carried on as if I didn't hear and obeyed. He said, "Grrr, steady, stop it." When I got home I said to Daddy, "You told the truth." He said, "Of course I did. I wouldn't." I said, "The first thing my horse did was whoop." I think the groom was more anxious than me, because I knew I'd been warned that he may do it. Daddy warned me. But they were lovely, and we rode over Shotover, and we were up there, some years ago now, and they've built toilets up there, which is a very good thing. It looked magnificent, and they made it a very nice place, but it was quite raw when we were up there. And some hooligans jumped out of the hedge as Pam went by on her horse, and of course he shied. Pam went over the top, but she did ballet dancing, and she was very careful how she fell. I mean, if that had been me, I'd have gone flop and probably broken my shoulder or something. But that was a wicked thing for those hooligans to do. And I said, "Are you all right, Pam?" "Yes, they're silly fools," he said. I said, "I'll give them a look when I go by." And I went, "Don't you try that on me."
So you never went over to Port Meadow or anywhere like that then?
We didn't. We rode on Port Meadow, I think twice. There was a riding school there. Well, you could hire a horse. But there's also cows on Port Meadow, and I'm afraid of cows. So
Oh, yeah.
that didn't appeal to me very much. Not that they were harming me, but I thought, I don't much care for that. But it was a nice ride that we were able to have, and of course we didn't have to go far to get to it. But
You say you were married in 51.
yes.
Did your sister ever get married?
No, she didn't, because the war mucked up her. So many dear young men were Spitfire pilots, and they went off and they never came back.
And she was born, what, 1920? Something like that?
1920, yeah.
Right, yeah.
But I was saying, I don't know if I said this before, she was very well liked. She was working, doing administrative help to them in the biochemistry laboratory, and that biochemistry was an active place to examine naughty things, and they were all in Pamela's office because she was doing the administrative work for them, and they were laughing and joking, and Pam said, I said, "Steady on. Remember, there's an old lady, not an old lady, a single lady here, not married." And they roared with laughter and said, "Pammy, don't try and pull the wool over our eyes. We love you so much. You're not an old maid."
So she worked at Oxford University?
She worked for a little short time.
Oh, right. In biochemistry, did she?
Yes, active biochemistry. That means they had all the specimens brought up to examine,
Right.
and some of them were naughty ones.
Because they did a lot of work on penicillin in...
Yes, that's
The
right.
discovery of penicillin was done
They did.
during the early part of the Second World War, wasn't it?
And that was a policeman, I think, who
It was a policeman, yeah.
Yes.
That's right. He fell off his bike or something.
And
He had an accident and got gangrene, didn't he?
Yes.
Because I've done a lot of work on... I've worked with some of the original people
Lovely.
from that were still alive in the
Yeah.
1990s.
Now,
So
Mr. Elliot Smith was a surgeon. I was promoted to be his secretary
Right.
and his private work as well. And he was such a kind man. He was a brilliant surgeon, but he was so placid. And when I was married and had my honeymoon, they had a locum. And when I got back, I thought, good. There was a pile of notes like that from the clinic. And I thought, funny. And Mr. Elliot Smith, "Oh, good morning, Jean. How are you? Glad to see you. I'm sorry I didn't get chance to come up and use the locum." And he saved all the letters for me. I said, "Well, that's quite all right."
When did you start at the Radcliffe then? What year?
Oh, I really I can't say.
Must have been. It wasn't during this. Was it during the Second World War? Yeah, it must have been. It must have been in the late 30s, early 40s.
Must have been. I was so pleased to have got the job.
Because you did secretarial college, you say, when you left.
Yes,
That would have been around 1940. Is that right?
yes, we
Because you
had.
said you were at school till you were 16.
I was.
So that's
Well,
1940.
It seemed like 16. I wouldn't swear to it in court. Perhaps I
How
was.
long were you at college? Can you remember? For the secretarial.
No, I can't because
Can't
I.
have been long.
No,
You didn't like it, obviously.
I was fighting to do shorthand. Pam was darling. She was explaining to me because I was doing my shorthand perfect, but I was writing enough shorthand as if it was longhand,
Right.
like "Dear Sir."
Yeah.
You know, I was doing "Dear Sir," whereas you do up and down, and she explained to me that, Jean, it's shorthand, dear, so don't do it as if it was longhand. And I was sort of translating it as you would do if you were learning French or
Yeah.
something.
You said you were
So-
at the Radcliffe Infirmary for 41 years, did you say?
I really,
You said it was over 40 years you did at
Yes.
Radcliffe. What did you actually do? It wasn't just admin, was it?
what did I...
What did you actually do at the Radcliffe? What was your job?
Well, I was secretary to Mr. Elliot Smith and Dr. Alice Carlton. Now, Dr. Alice Carlton was the consultant dermatologist, and when I talk about consultants, I mean consultants that it's thrown about a bit today that you've seen a consultant, but they're not proper consultants. And she was magnificent. She was so brilliant. She was a dermatologist, and if you came through the door with a rash, she knew exactly what it was, and she was very, very smart. And she seemed to click with me that I sat in the skin clinic 2 afternoons a week to take down all the notes to save her bothering to come up to the registry. I got a book full of shorthand when I'd finished, and I had a great time. And when she decided to go abroad round the world, she said, I wonder if you and Stanley would mind keeping an eye on my property. She lived at the corner of Bevington Road. We said yes. She said there would be my maid still there, but she's a bit harum-scarum and I'd like it. So we did that, and when she came back, she invited Stan and me to a little sherry party with the films that she'd taken and showed us all what she was doing, and I thought that was very kind of her with all her friends. And she was a very, very clever woman, but she wouldn't take on with fools, you know. I think we got on well because one day she was dictating to me in a little room, and she said, you know, June, I can do 120 words a minute. I learnt shorthand. And I said, well, there's no need to dictate at 120 words a minute, Dr. Carlton. And she roared at after. But she was a brilliant dermatologist. Brilliant. She really was. And she was very, very smart. And in those days, people that were going slightly grey
Yeah.
had a blue rinse, a very, very pale blue rinse. And she had that. And she was known as the doctor with the blue rinse, and she came to outpatients, but she was so kind.
When did you finish there then? In the 70s or the 80s?
When,
When did you finish at the Radcliffe Infirmary?
as soon as JR2 was finished,
Right.
we had to go up, and I was up there for 2 years, and I thought, this isn't for me, Jean. You're knocking on retire. So I retired, but
When was that? What was the date? Can you remember the year?
no, I don't worry. If I want to do something, I do it. I don't worry about dates.
No.
I'm not.
So you stayed your whole working life at the Radcliffe Infirmary?
Yes.
Amazing.
Had a
You
wonderful.
must have seen a lot of changes in that 40 years.
Well, I did, but on the whole, most of it, excuse me, was stagnant, because you see, the house officers, there was a consultant and a registrar. Then there was a senior house officer and a junior one, and they were in position for 3 months or 6 months. So there's big movement in the medical
Right.
side, and it was such a happy time. Mind you, you worked very hard. I mean, it wasn't a 9 till 5 job. It was for some people, but quite often I got there at 8:30 and didn't leave till 7:30 because there was such a lot of work. There were only 3 of us. I worked for dermatologist, consultant surgeon, and gradually it fanned out. But it was lovely.
And you were living in Walton Well Road at that time?
Walton Crescent, darling.
Walton Crescent.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was a nice 5-minute walk then, was it?
So I got to work, you know.
Did you go in the back way through?
Sometimes,
What was that in those days? Was that ear, nose and throat or maternity?
sometimes I did.
Maternity, wasn't it, in those days?
You went through the eye hospital way.
It was the eye, was it?
Yes, and there was a big furnace there and a chimney.
That was
With-
opposite
They burnt
the
all the stuff.
OUP, opposite University Press.
Yes, bang opposite.
Yeah, that's right.
But mainly I went up Little Clarendon Street and along St Giles's and just automatically went in the casualty entrance up the stairs to my office. So I did a bit, we walked miles, you know, because all the wards were right up to Observatory Street. The hospital extended
Really?
right up
along
there.
Goodness.
So if you had to take a note, you thought, my God, I'm going up to Observatory Street now.
Nice long
So
walk.
we walked miles, but we didn't realise that we were doing it.
Because the Churchill up at Headington was really a sort of Second World War
Yes, it was. It was
hospital, wasn't it? Hence
taken
its name, the Churchill.
over with the Canadians,
Yeah.
and we went up to have a look, and it was really, you could tell that the Canadians had been there. It was quite a temporary
Well, it was all like Nissenhurst,
hospital,
wasn't it?
yes. And 4 of their wards were turned into army casualties, Hut A, B, C and D, and they were opposite the paternity, there's space there, and that was for the soldiers. Oh, we saw life. Yes, we did.
Oh yeah, I bet you did. Yeah.
One, I said,
Were you not a volunteer nurse during the war, Jean?
what then?
Were you not a volunteer nurse during the war?
Oh, yes, I did a couple nights, evenings. I belonged to the Red Cross, VAD. You know, you've got a big red thing.
Yeah.
And I'd got flat shoes on and black stockings, and I was dressed the part. And a real nurse, we were there helping the nurse. We weren't showing off, any of us, trying to do. But I did give enemas. I became the Queen Enema Giver.
That's your title, is it?
I had one gentleman, when I was giving him an enema, he said, I could blow it back. I said, "Don't you dare, don't you dare." And he laughed. Because in those days, they didn't have toilet rolls, they had tow.
What's that?
It's like dead grass, you know. Awful stuff it was. But people brought in their own proper toilet rolls, but they didn't supply toilet rolls to patients.
So you did that during the Second World War? 2 evenings a week you did that then?
Yes.
Incredible.
And I came on, I stayed on at work, changed, and went on to the wards. And I was on male surgical, and my friend also, she was on female surgical, Simmons ward, I was on Marlborough ward. It was very good, except I had to do something very silly, slipped up in the ward, and I didn't realise that the sister of the ward was behind screens, and she popped up. "Are you all right, nurse?" "Perfectly, thank you." Of course, she was a dragon. She really was a dragon.
They always had reputations, didn't they, in those days?
Yes, they were nice sisters and dragons. And sometimes I took some files to say that they were going to lecture on one of the patients. And she screamed at me, "How do they think that I can get that bed through that door? He's all hung up. How dare they?" And then she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, my dear, it's not your fault. Oh, I'm sorry I shouted at you." I said, "That's all right, sister, I quite understand. It's very annoying, isn't it?" "Very, dear. Thank you for understanding." But she screamed at me as if it was my fault that she couldn't get the bed through the door.
Don't you think it would be a good idea if they had them back up there now, though, looking after the wards? I think it would work better if they had sisters like that up in the wards now,
Yes.
running them properly.
You would be amazed how they run the ward that I was in, the Whitney Hospital. I think it's going to go. I'm not sure, but it was disgraceful.
Yeah, it is now, isn't it? Very much so.
Absolutely disgraceful.
So your husband went on to be a geography teacher
Yes.
after he retired. When did he finish doing that?
He retired when he was 45, 35, 60.
Right.
He said, "I think I've had enough." I said, "I think you have." So we went down to Devon to his mum. His dad had unfortunately died. And for a couple of days or so, and took her out. And his sister lived sort of opposite, but she didn't go over to her mum much. But that was her. I didn't say anything at all. I just kept quiet.
Not alive now, the sister?
No. She ended up in a nursing home because she was left. Well, she'd got a son, but old Tony turned out to be a bit gadding about and mixing with the wrong people. So,
A bit of a rumman, was he?
you know, great disappointment. But never mind, as I say, you can't lead other people's lives.
Where was your sister at this point then? Where was she living?
When
you were married and
yes,
your husband was in the police force, then he became a teacher. What was your sister Pam doing at this point?
my sister Pam was private secretary to the Chief Constable of Oxfordshire.
Oh.
And that was when Oxfordshire had its Chief Constable and Oxford City had their Chief Constable. And the Duchess of Norfolk was broken into, and Pamela was there with her boss, the chief constable, who went over to see what had happened, and took Pamela to take notes because she was there. And Pamela said she was a wonderful person, the Duchess of Norfolk. And when they were sat having a cup of tea and a biscuit, suddenly a beautiful spaniel came through, and in his mouth he'd got a great big fish that he'd stolen. And the Duchess said, "Oh, you naughty boy, give it me." And she looked at Pam, she said, "That's our tea." He'd stolen it. She was charming, though.
So you lived in Walton Crescent.
Walton Crescent.
You did. You lived in Walton Crescent, is that right?
I lived in Walton Crescent
With Stanley?
Yes,
When did you move to Blaydon?
40 years ago, I think you'll find it was. I was in my 50s, 60, 70, 80, 90, yes. So we've been here 40 odd years. Kathleen came soon after us, didn't you, in your house?
67 we came. You were here then.
Because these houses were built then, weren't they? They were built 76, weren't they?
Or 77 ours was built.
Yeah, that's right. We were one of the first ones built. Yeah. So that was all fields when you lived here. That was all fields out the back.
It was, but it didn't worry us about the houses because we'd come right from the city and we're used to houses in front of us. In fact, we discussed it and said, well, if you've got an open piece of ground, which it was, that could be dangerous with people going in and throwing things in. And so it was an improvement, really, to the road to have those houses.
Right, so you moved here with Stanley then?
Yes, we shared. Mummy and Daddy said we could share the house, and it's all ruined inside now, but the conservatory was lovely, and the utility room was where I had my kitchen, my gas stove, my fridge, and we were together but quite separate.
Right.
We were living in the West Wing.
Of this house?
Yes,
Right.
and Mummy and Daddy and Pamela in the East
Oh, right, you
Wing.
all lived here?
Yes.
Oh, right.
And yet we all lived together but separately.
That's really nice, isn't it?
Yes, we were all happy together, Mummy saying.
When did you move here as a family then, all of you?
We moved here when I was in my 50s.
Right. Goodness.
And now I'm 90, 40 odd years ago.
Right.
Quite.
So that must have been just before these houses were built then?
Yes.
Mid-70s, something like that?
They were built within a couple of years that we were here, I think.
Yeah, they were built they were built between 75 and 77, I think, something like that.
Yes, because Mrs. Theobald, she had a bungalow and she decided to sell her bungalow and the land, and then those houses were built there.
That was some time later. Though,
But it
Julie,
didn't
wasn't
worry
it?
us because you've got neighbours, but you're so detached because we are detached.
Yeah.
Kathleen, I think,
Yeah, we-
almost detached, semi-detached, definitely. So,
But they're far enough back, aren't they, that they're not too bad. They're very tall houses, though, aren't they?
yes, you see, that's what Pam and I used to say they're copying. They copied the height of this one, but they no need to have done that. They could have made them a little less roof.
They have big roofs on them, big roofs.
Yes, I mean, it's...
Because we live in one, as you know, as well.
The original plans were for maisonettes on there, weren't they?
Were they?
And
You what, though?
the original plans were for maisonettes to be built over there, and the plans were refused because of the height was one reason
Oh,
why they
yeah.
said that they would be too high. So when they built ours, the people said, well, ours ended up almost as high as the maisonettes
Yeah.
would have been.
I don't think the builder was a very nice man anyway, from what people say to me. Because there used to be an old dry stone wall went along the front, an old Cotswold stone wall. And of course he knocked it all down and put this fake one up instead.
Yes.
And also our house, the one that we live in, is built too far forward. If you look at our house, it's very forward compared to all the rest of them. And he said, I'll do what I want. I'll build it how I want to. And in fact, I think ours is about 6 or 10 foot too far forwards. But he just said, oh, you know, in those days, I'll just do what I like. Incredible.
It's funny how they like to mess about, because Kathleen's, I think, I don't know, but I think yours is much bigger than, we say, the ones that are renting that house. I'm sure. Because you've only got to look at the wall of your house and theirs. Yes,
So
I'm
you're-
sure.
If you moved here, the whole family moved here in the mid-70s. How old were your mum and dad at that time? They must have been getting on a bit.
Oh, they were, but they loved it.
They must have been in their 70s easily.
Definitely, because I was
They
50.
must have been, yeah, they must have been born, what,
50.
late 1890s? Something
Yes.
like that?
I know that Mummy was 30 when I was born.
Right, so she'd have been born 1895 then. 94.
Oh, you would have loved my family so good.
I didn't realise the whole family lived here, did you?
Oh, yes.
That must have been really nice to have everybody in one house.
Yes. And I'd never ever been in a house on my own, ever,
Yeah.
till I had my heart broken. And to my amazement, I went up to bed that night and I didn't worry. I felt safe. I never thought I'd ever live on my own. But I'm cocky with it now.
Exactly. That's what I like about you, Jean. It's great. So when did your parents die? How long ago?
Now, the time goes very quickly. Well, Daddy was only here for 4 years,
Right.
and he was terminally ill during that time. So, I must point out to Charles that maths isn't my subject.
But that would have been late 70s then. He
Yes,
died.
I'll believe you. I think that's true.
Right. And what about your mum?
How old was she?
Mm.
No, Daddy put his age on for the First World War. I think they were near enough. Daddy might have been a couple of years older than Mum, but
Right.
not very much older.
Right. And then you lived here the rest of the time with your sister, and of course your husband was still alive then.
No,
Oh, he died, did he? When
he
did he die?
died.
Died before you came here.
No, we were here,
Right.
and I don't know, suddenly I said, Stan, and he, and I called Pam. I said, I don't think Stan's very well, Pam. And he was absolutely raving ill. And he didn't wake me during the night, so, and he was rushed up to the John. And within 24 hours, he died.
Incredible.
The surgeon said to me, do you want him put on a life support? I said, I don't think. He said, well, I'll be quite honest with you, dear. If it was my family, I wouldn't do it.
No. Well, it's quality of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
I
the
said,
bottom line.
thank you very much. And we came home, Pam and I, because we'd left the dog and then went back, and within 5 minutes of getting there, Stanley died,
Oh, that's a shame.
and that was awful.
So that, again, wasn't very long after you'd moved in here.
Oh, it's
Oh yes,
Was it quite a while?
Yes, it was.
So it was in the 80s then, 1980s.
Yes, well established. How old was Stan when he died? 57. 60 odd, I think.
Right.
Oh, my poor broken heart. It was broken. But I'm bold.
Exactly.
Fight on, Jean.
So then you carried on living here with your sister?
Yes, we were getting on lovely, old Pam and I. We always did. People were amazed. They said, "Do you get on with your sister?" Of course I do. I love her. And we used to go out and...
I remember you driving in the old car. I remember the car you had.
Yes, that was lovely. And then, all of a sudden, Pam woke up and she was bright yellow. She was jaundiced all over. And I rang the surgery and asked for a call. And Dr. Turner kindly came in the afternoon.
It's big of him.
And as he was walking up the stairs, so my darling Pam died. He didn't attempt to come, and I'd not forgive him for that.
No, but let's not say too
No,
much
no.
about Dr. Turner. Because we moved into the village in 1988 we moved into the village.
Oh, after us then.
Yeah. Adam was born, was actually born. He was born 6 months after we moved in.
Oh,
Well, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, 88. He was born in the March, and we moved in 6 months before he was born.
Wow.
And Lucy was about 2.5, nearly 3. So we've been here 20 odd years, 28 years, whatever
You
it
had
is.
whose mother was it that used
Yeah.
to live with you? Was it
My
you?
mum, yeah, my mum lived with us, yeah.
I remember Adam and James, they went to school together.
Oh yes, they're still best mates now.
And I think that's splendid.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Well, Lucy only moved out about a year ago. She's moved to Radley, so she's moved out.
Is your daughter married?
No. She's 30 this year.
She's such a beautiful girl.
30 years old. I've got a 30-year-old daughter. It's
30.
terrible.
Yes, old John Herbert's got a daughter of 41 this year. That
So,
makes him feel old.
The final question, Jean. What's the secret to long life then?
I don't know, darling. I think happiness, be kind and helpful to other people if possible, but never envy and never lie. Little white lies you can say, "Oh yes, you look very nice," thinking I wouldn't have had that heart. But you don't want to hurt people's feelings because they say, "What do you think of my hat?" I'm very pleased with it. So you should be. I couldn't wear a hat like that, but you're okay. And you've made her day happy with a little tiny white lie coming. Personally, I wouldn't have bought it if I'd have been but she looked all right in it, and she was enjoying wearing it. And that's what I think, a clear conscience, and be kind to people if you possibly can.
And enjoy every day, eh?
Yes. I'll never forget my darling mum and dad. When they retired, they said, "We've done nobody any harm. We haven't crept into any jobs that we weren't entitled to have." And Daddy said, "No, we can sit round the fire in our retirement with a very, very clear and happy conscience. And they did. They had a lovely, happy life. I was sorry they didn't live. I don't know why I've lived to 90, because they all left me, funnily enough, when they were 86. Mummy died. Daddy died when he was 86. Pamela, 86. And Stanley John, 86.
Really, all the same
And
age?
here am I stuck, 90.
Yeah.
I think someone's got hold of my birth certificate and falsified it.
Where were you born? Did you were born at home or did you go?
Yes, at home.
At home.
Actually, I was 11 pounds when I was
Oh.
born. Yes, Mummy.
My mum was 14 pounds. My mum, she was a stone when she was born. 14 pounds 1 ounce. My mum.
Oh, she's beaten me then.
1914 she was born.
Difficult.
Oh,
wasn't it?
crime.
She didn't walk for the first year because she was too damn big. Her legs couldn't carry her. She was such a big baby.
Oh,
I was a delicate 9'7". I was,
well, my darling Pam, the doctor and his wife were having a baby, and they were all friendly with Mummy and Daddy. And he said to Mummy, "Don't worry, I'll be with you." Of course, he was called away before he could come to Mummy. And Pam flew here. She was born within seconds. And she used to say, "That's why I'm so tired. I came in a rush." And but I was 11 pounds.
11 pounds, goodness me.
Mummy was very ill with me because I'd got my foot on one of her kidneys, and it had been there all the time she was carrying me, so she was in a... But dear old Mum, she persevered on.
That's
I'm
been
just...
great. Thank you, Jean. That's been lovely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for asking me. I
Well, it's been great.
hope I haven't said too much rubbish, but you can rub out.
Oh, no, I'm not going to rub. I'll put it all in, don't worry. You said you weren't going to be naughty. You're dead right, you weren't. You've been...
I don't mind that. I think it was very kind of you meant to think of me.
I
You
did.
must like me.
I remember when I had my motorbike and you said you wanted to go on the back. I remember that. That was a... Do you remember when I had that big motorbike, that big black one? And
Yeah,
I said, "What do you think, Jean?" And you said you'd love to go on the back.
yeah.
That was only about 5 years ago. So you'd been 85 then, and you wanted to go on the back of the bike. I've always remembered that.
Rubbing in how old I am.
Sorry, 65. Thank you, Jean.